You have to walk the talk. You have to be authentic as a leader. If you're not doing it, they see that.
It is entirely universal. There's other people who are going through this.
For me, a great leader needs to be able to marry three things: vision, systems, and people.
Welcome to Leadership Moments if this is your first time, and if you are returning, thank you for your support.
This show is about leaders from all walks of life, leadership tips, and maybe even a little of what you wouldn't expect to help you in leadership.
We would appreciate it if you tell someone else about our podcast as we strive to support all leaders that want to just be better.
Let's get on with the show.
Today's guest is Dr. Keith Dorsey. Keith is the renowned executive coach, author, and expert in leadership development and corporate governance. With over 25 years of experience, Keith is passionate about helping senior leaders secure seats at the corporate boardroom table. His new book, The Boardroom Journey: Practical Guidance for Women to Secure a Seat at the Table, offers actionable strategies for aspiring board members and independent directors seeking their next board seat. So get ready to gain some invaluable insights on leadership, optimal diversity, and making a meaningful impact at the top. Let's jump in. Keith, I am really excited to have you on our show today. There's so many topics that I want to talk about with you, and I hope we have enough time to hit them all. But I want to start off with, you've had this fascinating career, beautiful, successful, but you had this pivotal moment late in your career that really extended and kind of led you on this path of where you are now. So I'd love for you to start with sharing with our listeners that moment in your life that you and I talked about, with that pivotal moment.
First of all, Stacey, thank you for having me on. And that day, that pivotal moment that you're talking about, I wish I could forget, but unfortunately I can't. And it did send me down a completely different trajectory. But I have to say, that was the beginning of my third chapter. The first being the military for a number of years, and the second being corporate America for almost 30 years. And I had an incredible career leading very, very large sales teams and being that turnaround specialist. And my identity was wrapped up in that. But when I went into my third chapter, being this portfolio career, doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, I recall 6 weeks after my so-called retirement, being at a board meeting at a university, and they asked us board members to actually stand up and introduce ourselves. And I was like the sixth board member to introduce ourselves to the guests that were attending our board meeting. And I remember standing up, and it felt like I said nothing for 20 minutes, and sweat was just coming off my brow. But it was probably all of a second and a half. And I stumbled because I went into autopilot, and I was about to tell them about who I am, this executive that's been an executive for double-digit years. But I just retired, so-called retired, and I was no longer that executive, and I really didn't know what to say. And I said something that pleased everyone. And I sat down, and to this day, I have no idea what I said, but nevertheless, it seemed to be okay. But I remember after that board meeting, walking back to the hotel, walking into the hotel room where my wife was. And as soon as my eyes locked onto hers when I walked in the door, I just started crying. And she said, "Keith, what's going on?" And basically I said, "I don't know who I am." My whole identity was wrapped up into being a corporate executive. And at this particular point, I really didn't know who I was. So in Keith Dorsey fashion, I said, if there's a problem, figure out a way to solve it. And what I uncovered, because I lost my identity, that I was dealing with some imposter syndrome issues and different things like that. And I came up with this excellent plan. I knew that getting accepted into really good universities, into their doctorate program, would be a challenge, and I needed an ego boost. So I came up with this plan to challenge myself to get accepted in a doctorate program. But in Keith Dorsey fashion, I did it by applying to 7 different universities, 8 different doctorate programs, and just to see if I can get accepted. I had to reach out to 15 to 16 of my former executive colleagues, various CEOs and other levels, and asked if they would be a reference for me because every application required 2 to 3 references. And I did that, and I submitted all those applications, which I never would recommend submitting to for 8 different programs, but that's what I did. And in doing so, I figured out late in the game that I had now 15 different accountability partners out there who knew that they wrote a great reference for me, and they would continually ask, have you heard back from the university yet? Did you get accepted? Well, I got accepted to all 7 universities, all different, all 8 programs. And and now I have 15 accountability partners asking me these questions. Well, I I had to accept one of them and actually go to a university, and I didn't really plan on doing that. I just wanted an ego boost, but I ended up picking the University of Southern California and their um, organizational change and leadership program, and that's how I got caught up into this chapter that I'm in right now, and the beginning of my serendipitous journey.
That is wonderful, and thank you for sharing that story. And what I love about that is we try to define ourselves young in our career of who are we, and we believe we know who we are, and we go forward with that for so many years in our career, but we have to redefine ourselves throughout our lives. And we talk a lot about staying curious, being curious, and we get in that comfort zone sometimes in our career. And then to be able to say, you know what, I really need to continuously learn. I need to be able to ask these questions. And for you to say, okay, I'm going to go back to school. That's amazing. I'm not sure I could do it. I'm not going to lie. And I think it would be very tough, but I commend you for that. For one, saying, okay, I need to redefine myself. Who am I? And I think what's beautiful about that for our listeners is it really doesn't matter where you're at in your career or in your life. These moments will happen and they will happen again. And it's how you respond to it is what's important. So I appreciate you sharing that story.
You know, I heard many years ago, I read something in a book and it said life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react. Stuff will always happen. That 10% is going to go down every single day, but 90% of it comes down to what are you going to do about it and how are you going to react and how do you want to show up as that individual, as that leader. And that's what I decided to do when I felt that I lost my identity and I was dealing with a bit of imposter syndrome. One was the goal, the ego boost to get in. And once I decided to actually go, it was about learning. It was about making a difference and using this chapter to do generative work and how what do I want them saying, other people to say during my eulogy about me, and this is a chapter where I say it's a serendipitous journey where I kind of let go and let God, but I'm learning so much more about who I am and how I can help others and pay things forward with that
Yeah.
90% of the decision that I made because of the 10% that happened to me.
I use that stat all the time too. So I love that you said that. It is so true, that it is 90% how you react to things. And you mentioned from someone from the outside looking at your career up to that point, highly successful. One, thank you for your service in our country. And two, highly successful in the corporate world. And for you to have that imposter syndrome just states that there actually is a stat out there that says 70% of people in the workplace have imposter syndrome at some point. I argue the number is actually a little bit higher because I have a lot of clients that have this feeling, and it's men and women. There's a belief that some people believe it's only women, but it actually is men too. So I appreciate you sharing that. But from the outside, highly successful, but you can still have this feeling, and how do you redefine it? And so I think it's important that you bring that up. But I want to get into, so now you're in the university and are getting to your dissertation. And I'd love for you to tell a little bit about you did this dissertation, but it evolved into you doing this book as well. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, the the process of a dissertation is a long process. So much research that you end up doing, whether that's quantitative or qualitative sort of research. And at the time, you're just getting data. You're really digging deep, and then you have to tell a story with that data. And I remember my dissertation chair sitting me down, and she said, "Keith, a good dissertation is a done dissertation. And all of this research that you have out here, I don't know when you will ever graduate. You have to pare this down." And I didn't completely agree with her, but they said trust the process, Keith. And she said you have to pare it down. She gave me some examples as to ways that I can pare it down. And then I actually did. But I asked her, I said, "Corinne, how do I, or what do I do with all this other data and research and information that's rich that ended up on the cutting room floor?" And she looked at me and she said, "Write a book." I was like, "Oh, that wasn't on my bucket list either." So that serendipitous journey just took me a completely different direction. And that's how the beginning of this book, The Boardroom, that was the origin of the book, The Boardroom Journey, Practical Guidance for Women to Secure a Seat at the Table. I narrowed it down to a certain segment of women for my dissertation, but then opened it up to all women uh, for the book.
Yeah, and what I love about that you did in the book is you took a woman in her 20s to up to women in their 50s and 60s. And so you give, it no matter where you are in your life, like how can this apply to me and how can I see myself as this individual? And I would even think for men that you can now get an understanding of how a woman might feel or what they might experience. So it's really for not only women to help them learn with getting into the boardroom, but also men too. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that of like, what was your goal in having these four women that you have, recognized in this book?
Yeah, and the four women were they're fictitious, and they're protagonists that I created from the stories of hundreds of women, and in learning their enablers and their barriers that they face throughout their career, and then also the barriers that they actually face trying to get on a board and how they overcame those. I was able to take their different periods of their career and actually parse it down to, okay, this is what a 25-year-old could do. And in my book, I have four women: a 25-year-old brand new manager in a corporation, a 40-year-old brand new senior manager in a corporation, a 55-year-old executive who says she's going to retire in the next 3 to 5 years, and then a 62-year-old CEO of a second generation family business who is now going to turn the business over after 12 years of being the CEO to her much younger brother. All four women at 25, 40, 55, and 62 said that they eventually would like to serve on a private or public corporate board. Well, what should they be doing at those segments? And what I uncovered from these women, some accidentally went the board route, and others were very intentional. For me, myself, I couldn't even spell the word board at the age of 30. And so many of them, I would ask questions. If you can go back and give your younger self some advice, what would you tell them to do? And many of their answers ended up in those individuals' personas and their journey along the way. And so that's how I came up with the way that I would navigate the information that's being disseminated in the book. But I also uncovered, Stacy, the their paths are not unique to just women. There are certain things that women have to deal with, of course, that men don't. And the culture within organizations, that may be different, but the actual path to the boardroom, the tips and the action steps apply to everyone.
Yeah, I love that. And you're absolutely right on those steps to be able to take. Like, It doesn't matter your gender. You still have to take those steps. And so tell me, why did you pick women for your book then, if the steps are the same?
That was a bit of a serendipitous journey as well. And it goes back to the beginning of my doctorate program. And basically, I decided when I immediately started my program that I wanted my problem of practice to be around shareholder primacy on corporate boards and governance. And I recall about a month into the program, I'm really beginning my research and I'm reading all kind of case studies, white papers, different things like that from academic journals. And I was about one Saturday afternoon, evening, I was 4 hours into just research. And I lift my head up and I realized I went down some sort of rabbit hole that I didn't intend on going down. And I have been reading about the lack of gender diversity on corporate boards. And I said, wow, how did you end up down this rabbit hole? And what are you going to do about it? And so I said, well, one, it was either procrastination or I was interested in it. And I giggled and I said, Keith, you've been procrastinating for hours. You got to get back on the ball. But it was now late. And so that next day, Sunday, I dove right back in. And 2 hours later, I lift my head up and I went down another rabbit hole, and it was around the lack of ethnic diversity on corporate boards. And so that Monday morning, I went into the University of Southern California and changed my problem of practice from shareholder primacy in corporate governance to the lack of gender and ethnic diversity on corporate boards. And so throughout all my research, it was really capturing that sort of information. And and then in narrowing my focus, I ended up writing a dissertation called Corporate Board Diversity, a Path to Board Service from the Wisdom of Black Women Directors. So I capture the ethnicity and the gender side of things, but most of my research was around women. And I tell people I kind of let go and let God, and it wasn't something that was on my bucket list to check. And I wasn't this burning desire to help women. I just went that way and felt so passionate about it. And I wish I can give you a much better answer as to why, other than I followed the lead and here I am, and hopefully beginning to make a difference.
I don't think there is a better answer. The answer is you followed your passion, and I love that. That's what I tell my clients to do all the time, is to follow their passion. And I just spoke for International Women's Day recently, and during that I talked about board diversity, and the stat that I had was, if you have a board that is 20% more women and gender diverse than other boards, you actually outperform the competitor every time. Every time. I love that you did this. I think it's great to be able to do it. The more we talk about it, the more that we're aware about it. We know we have unconscious bias, and just having that understanding so we can have that conversation and be intentional about that diversity is what is key and how we can move forward. So I love that you talked about it.
Yeah, I honestly believe that. And so often we talk about the moral imperative as to why it makes sense to make certain that our boards kind of resemble our stakeholders, and our stakeholders, if our stakeholders are 50% women or 75% women, then maybe that's the way your board should look. And that's more on the moral imperative side. But now there are studies out there that will show the business imperative side of it. And I challenge more organizations and more boards to really think about the business side, because we have a fiduciary responsibility as a board member to mitigate risk, to disrupt, to seek blue oceans, to make certain that we are helping that C-suite team of managers do the things they need to do in order to continue to grow the revenue and the shareholder value. And if by having women on your boards will increase the chances of doing that while mitigating risk. That's our fiduciary responsibility. And that's around the business imperative.
Yeah. And you mentioned some in the book, and one of them was I'm not even sure if you pronounce it ELF Beauty or Elf Beauty, but their bold campaign. And do you want to just talk about that for a second? Because I think it's a fun campaign that kind of just helps recognize some things.
Yes, they have a couple campaigns out there at this particular point, but one that they had in I think it was May of 2024, and I don't have it completely in front of me right now. But Elf Beauty, uh, their CEO and just their culture is about surrounding themselves with the right people, making certain that their employee base, their leadership base, and their board resembles the makeup of their stakeholders. And they have 78% of their board members are women, and I believe it's 44% are diverse. And that's something that the CEO, Terang, actually stands by. And the company believes it so much that they have partnered with many board related organizations to make certain that they get that word out there that there is a business imperative to having diversity on your boards, and they're proof of it with 24 quarters of significant growth. And they're a strong organization. And Elf, their CEO, Terang and Men, actually wrote the foreword of my book. He believes in this I guess he believes in corporate board diversity so much, and just diversity in the workplace so much, that he read the book and said, "No, this is in line with my vision, mission, and values." And so I'm very excited about that. But it, hopefully that answered your question as to what Elf Beauty is doing. Their main campaign though was I I don't have it in front of me, but so many dicks. And basically, what they were saying was that, and on boards today, there are more men by the name of Richard, Rich, Rick, or Dick than uh, women on boards, as well as people of color. And it was an interesting twist as to how they put the campaign out there, but the message is sound. And that's something that they believe people should do something about.
Yeah, and that is such a profound statement. Like, it's a fun campaign with the way that they did it, and it's so many dicks, so few of everyone else. And the fact that you take the name Richard, Rich, Rick, and in the past it was Dick was the short form for that, but it's not used as much anymore. But when you take that and you say that there's actually more people on boards with just that name than the entire group of underrepresented people. I mean, just think about that for a minute. It's fascinating on how much work we still have in front of us to be able to do that. So I appreciate you talking about that. It's really important. Okay, so I could talk for days, but if you had one thing, you're on the elevator, you have one thing, advice to give to a woman that's looking to get on a board, or maybe even a man that's getting on a board, what would be the one piece of advice with all your research that you've done?
To narrow it down, Stacy, to one, I guess one that I would say is tell anyone and everyone that you are interested in serving on a corporate board. So many people came from that school of thought that it's not what you know, it's who you know. And what I've uncovered from one of my studies was that it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And the more that you interact with people and you let them know that you're interested in the board, regardless of what they're doing and on their walk of life, and the more that people will talk about you and at least know that you're interested in a board and may bring your name up in situations that you are unaware of. And the example that I give many is that, let's say you were asked to serve on a panel and you're now sitting on the main stage, and there are 1,000 people in the audience, and you look around and you know about 30 of those individuals. If that saying came down to, it's not what you know, it's who you know 30 people out there. But by the time you're done on the panel, there are 970 more people who know you that you don't know. And they got to hear how you think, how your mind works, and what type of questions you ask, and the way that you dive into complex situations. And those 970 people that you didn't know, if you happen to mention, and I'm interested in serving on boards. I serve on 2 boards and I'm looking for 1 more board, but you're saying it as part of the general conversation, 970 more people know you and may be talking about you. And that's how many people end up getting their board seats, because there's this pre-vetting of a process when it comes to boards. We as board members will sit around a board table and we know someone's terms about to end and they're not coming back to the board. And we ask, who do you know? And this person will say, I heard this woman talk at this conference that I was, and I just love the way she thinks. I know she serves on 2 boards and I believe she's looking for another board, but you don't know that person. They know you. So that would be the advice that I would give people, to extend their autopilot speech. When someone asks, what do you do? And you go into autopilot for 23 to 30 seconds and you say what you do in your vocation. And I challenge people to extend their autopilot introduction by another 7 to 11 seconds and say, and I serve on 2 nonprofit boards, and I'm in the process of looking for a private company board in this sector because I'm ready to pay things forward.
I love that. I love that advice. It's so hard for a lot of people to say what they want, because they feel that they're, showing off in an egotistical way, but that's not the case. People don't know what you want unless you tell them. And I love how you added, I'm looking for a board in this industry or this niche. The more clear you can be in what you're seeking, the easier it actually is to fill. People feel like they narrow themselves in by doing that, but the reality is you're actually opening more doors by doing that. So I love that you add that piece.
Yeah, well, thank you, Stacy. So there are 2 schools of thoughts when it comes to that. They say, be broad and don't pigeonhole yourself into this category or that category. Tell them all the great things you've done so they can connect the dots for you. That's one school of thought. And I challenge people to actually figure out what brings them joy, figure out their own personal vision, mission, and values, and then begin the search in those areas and let people know, because it's in those areas that you have your superpowers, your secret sauce, and those areas that bring you joy. You show up differently, and that could be the differentiator between one extraordinary executive and this exceptional executive here. How do I choose which one? And if that the one who is interviewing in their sweet spot shows up much differently. And when you share with people your sweet spot, they are more inclined to think of you when they hear of a scenario that's a great fit for you. When you keep it very broad, how do they know when to think about you? So I come from the latter school of thought, narrowing it down, giving people the answers to your test.
I love that. And I completely agree with you because everyone is busy. Everyone, like connecting the dots takes time. And a lot of people don't want to take that time. They want to be told what you're seeking. So now when it comes up, the only dot they're connecting is connecting you with the other person that can help you with that one thing that you're doing. Not like, oh, do I think this person could be good in this? Do they want to be good in this? Do they want to do this? It's no, I know they want this. I know they're good at it. Let me just connect you.
Because
So
they told
totally
me so.
agree. That's
Absolutely.
right. That's right. They showed their passion, like we talked about. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, there's that sound. It's time for our fun questions. Are you ready for the questions?
I am.
All right. Would you rather have the power to read minds or the ability to time travel?
Oh, wow. That's a great one. I would say I might not want to be in the mind, read some people's minds. So I want to go with time travel in that one. To be able
I'm
to
with
get
you.
somewhere quickly, that's perfect.
Yep, yep. Reading people's minds, that might be a little scary for me sometimes.
So true.
Absolutely. All right, next question. Would you rather have the ability to cook like a world-class chef or have a personal chef who makes all your meals for you?
Oh, to cook like a world-class chef. Definitely.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, last question. Do you want to always know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow or have the ability to change any past decision you've made?
Now, I've never been asked that question before, Stacey. Wow. I would say the ability to know what's going to happen tomorrow and hopefully can do something creative with that bit of information. Yes.
I love that. I love the way you say that, like, and that I can do something creative with that. That is a beautiful way to look at it. So, Keith, thank you so much for your time today. I am super excited about your book. I know that so many readers are going to get a lot out of it, men and women, and love the work that you're doing around gender diversity and trying to bring more equality to that. So, really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and around today's, subject today. So, really appreciate that.
Thank you, Stacey. It's been great.
If you enjoyed the show, please go to leadershipmomentspodcast.com to subscribe to the podcast or on your favorite player, as well as follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can also send us a message on what you like and don't like, or what guest you want us to have on the show.
So until next time.
This is Stacey Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And I'm Tracy Ann Palmer. Be the change you wish to see in the world.